Welcome to the Gold Collection hat making class. Today we'll be looking at how to make the turban cap, and we're going to be looking at two designs of turbans. We're going to be looking at this design and this design of the caps. The caps are the bases, and then you put the designs on top of them. Turbans have become quite popular of recent times. They've been around for a while, but it has become a must-have in a lady's wardrobe of recent. So we're going to learn how to make the caps. These are the caps that I'm talking about, this and this. You can see that there are two different designs of caps, and so we're going to look at how to make these caps. And after making the caps, you can now design whatever you want to put on it to design it. Now we're going to start with this design. Let me show you once again. This is the design. We're going to start with this. Today I'm going to work with some satins, satin materials, and as lining I'm going to use some taffeta. So like I said, you can use any material of your choice. It depends on you. Any material would work. Now we're going to start with we're going to do this purple in this design. All right, so here I've cut a piece of material on the bias. Now if you don't know how to cut on the bias, you will need to attend one of my classes on YouTube. Watch it on YouTube, how to cut the bias. It's on the Gold Collection channel. You can get there to watch how to cut on the bias. Now we're going to need our material. We're going to need elastic, a 1-inch elastic. We're going to need 1/2 inch elastic. You're going to need your sewing machine. You can see my sewing machine to my right hand here. You're going to need quite a number of pins. All right, so to start with, you can see some pieces of material all over the place. We're going to start with pieces of material like this. And what is the measurement? The measurement for this is, on the fold it's 15 inches, so the long piece is 30 inches. You can see that on the fold it's 15 inches, meaning that the whole length is 30 inches. So this is 30 inches folded into two, and then the width is 3 inches. So I have a piece of material that is 30 inches by 3 inches, and I will need 5 of these pieces to make this design. I would also need 5 of these pieces to make the second design, 5 of each. Now the same way I have cut the main material, I would cut whatever it is I desire to use as the lining. For example, for the purple, I would like to use I would really love to use a purple material, but I'm short of purple right now, so I'm using a black material, a dark material. So I'm cutting exactly the same way I have cut the main material for the lining. So both the lining and the main material will be 30 inches long, folded into 2 and 3 inches in width, and have notched the center. All right, now for the first design that I'm talking about, there's something I'm going to do to the pieces that I have. All right, each of my pieces is 15 inches, is 30 inches folded into 2, giving me 15, and then I have 15 by 3 inches in length. I'm going to take my chalk and I'm going to measure off 4 inches at the front, 1, 2, 3, 4 inches from the back. I'm going to draw my line across. This will help me to cut. All right, and then I'm going to, so that you can see, I'm going to measure off ½ inch at the ends, and then draw a line to that ½ inch. You can put your ruler or your tape measure to help you in drawing that line. So about okay, you see that, and at the back you do the same thing. You cut off a little bit to each side so that you can have a shape there. You can see my shape here and my shape here, and so I'm going to cut off that shape. I'm going to cut off that shape. So that I will have this. This is the front and this is the back. The front here and then the back here. This is the front and this is the back. All right. Now what I have done to this piece, I'll do to the remaining 4 pieces. I will equally do to the lining. So once that is done, I will now start sewing the pieces together. Okay. So yeah, I am sewing all the 5 pieces now together. Each of the pieces I've sewn together, one after the other, carefully. And so all right, so here I've sewn all the 5 pieces together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see all the 5. I have sewn it together from one end to the other. You can see how I brought all the ends together here. All right, so I haven't sewn all the 5 pieces together now. The next thing is this is the center back, this is the front. This center back, I'm going to add elastic to it. The ½ inch elastic that I showed us as one of the items that we're going to be using. So we're going to use the ½ inch elastic at the center. We'll pull it and sew it down. All right. And I'm deliberately using black thread so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm pulling and sewing the elastic to the center. I pulled it very tight so that it pulls it together once it's sewn. All right, and exactly what I have done with this main material, I have done with the lining that we also cut in that shape. All right, so we will now come together after putting that in the center. You know, it's a long piece, so we'll take one end and bring it together so that we can have a cap. I hope you understand that. Okay. You have to be careful so that you don't sew all right, so now we have a cap. We have a cap just like what we have over here. But of course, you see that the circumference is wide. You'll see what we're going to do by what we're going to do with the band. All right, this is the lining. I've done exactly the same thing with the lining, and then I'll also sew it together here. In sewing it together, you sew together just with a 1/4 of an inch. But when you get to the end, you bring it to the center so that you can have your cap also, of course, and then you can put it together this way. All right, so we have the caps, the main material and the lining. They are ready, so we can put that aside and prepare the band, this band. Now the band is 40 inches long and 5 inches wide. 40 inches long and 5 inches wide. I've ironed it and folded it into two, lengthwise and breadthwise. So I have 20 inches on the fold. I hope you understand that. Now it's on the fold. I have 20 inches on the fold. I'm sure you can see that. I have 20 inches on the fold. All right, so I folded it into two and I have 20 inches. So I'll put my pin so that it won't be moving around. All right, and then you see some notches here. And how did I get those notches? You remember that the length of our piece of material was 15, so I marked there and I notched it. Now half of 15 is 7.5. I marked there and I notched it. This will help me when I'm placing the band on this pieces. What I'll do also is to notch the center of these edges. Here I'll notch. The other side I'll also notch. I'll do the same thing on the lining. This will help to make my work to be quite accurate. or at least with a little margin for error. Okay, I'll notch. All right. No, so we come back to the band. You remember that I said unfold, I have 2.5 now. 5 inches folded into 2 is 2.5. Then the length is 40 inches folded into 2 is 20. I've notched at 15 inches and at 7.5. Now, excuse me please. The next thing to do is to bring the first notch, the 15-inch notches together, right hand over left. You bring it together where the notches are, and then you slant it. Bring it together where the first notches are. This is the second notch, this is the first. So the first notches, you bring it together and then you slant it to give you that V shape in front. Oh, pardon me. Okay. I'm trying to. All right. And when you do your slanting, you now pin it down. Make sure the notches are together at the center. So we have brought it together, the notches together here at the center, and we have slanted it. You slant it in such a way that this end will come out. You have to carefully do it. All right, so we have a crossing over there. You have to make this and get it right. If you get it right, when you hold it at the center, you'll have your center back exactly where it's supposed to be. That center at the back, that's the 7.5 notch, that's the 15 notch. So you'll have this exactly like this. If this is not properly positioned, then you might have something like this or something like this. But if you have it properly positioned, then you have this. Now, when this has been done, the next thing is to cut 6 inches of elastic, of 1 inch elastic. Just 6 inches. Or you could use 6.5. Let's do 6.5 to allow for the sewing. 6.5 inches for the elastic. Now this is going to go to the back of this band, and you can see the elastic at the back of my turban. So this holds it together, so it gathers all the fullness of the band so that it can grip the head. All right, so what you will do from the notch, you remember our notches, the notches are 7.5, that's the center back. So you place your elastic inside the material, like one of my students said, you place this as if you want to bind the elastic in a skirt band. All right, and then you make sure that it's sitting properly. This is the 7.5 notching. You'll see my elastic is beyond it, at least half inch beyond that line. You can see my elastic inside, the imprint of my elastic. So this is where I'm going to sew. I'm going to pull that elastic to the other notch also. This is the center back. I'm going to pull that elastic to the 7.5 notch. All right, you can see the imprint of my elastic. It has moved beyond that notch so that I can sew it down. So we're going to encase that elastic now on the machine. We're going to gather all this fullness together and we're going to encase the elastic there. So we're going to the machine now. All right, so I've sewn that side down, and then I'm going to sew along, and I'm going to make sure that I am not sewing on the elastic. I'll pull the elastic. Make sure it's very important that I'm not sewing on the elastic. If I sew on the elastic, then I've defeated the purpose of what I'm doing. I'm pulling the elastic and making sure it's encased in that band. And I'm also making sure that, so we have sewn our elastic in place, and then I have sewn down the front piece, the crossover. I'm going to cut the excess so you can see that we have our band. That's the elastic part, and that is the front. So this is the front and this is the back. This is our center back. You remember the notches. This is our side notch and the second side notch. All right, so the next thing is to place the hat, the cap on the band. Remember, the elasticated part is the back, so it goes here, while the crossing part goes to the front. All right, so take the center back and the center back together on the band, you pin it together. You also take, you remember our side notch and this side notch, you pin it together. The other side is looking rather rough right now, but by the time you sew it together, you'll see that it will form your cap. You pin it together, and then now the center piece here, you place it carefully. This will take some practice, but once you're determined and you keep on practicing, you will get it right. You place it together. You place it at the center. That's the center front. And when you're sewing, you have to be careful so that this piece is not sewn together to the band. All right, so we're going to place this now and sew round. All right, so we have sewn it round. And so if I turn it to the right side, we have our cap. Now I'm going to put the lining. We're going to do opposite of what we did. This is the band. The band will be on the inside, and then we'll sandwich the band in between the two caps, back to back. Look for the side notch. That's our side notch there. You place it. Look for the center front. You place it exactly. Just like you did your main material. Look for the other side. Place it also. It has to be carefully done. All right. Look for the side notch, the other side. That's the notch. Replace it. And then we're back at the center back. All right. So when you sew this, you will wonder how you're going to turn it out. When you sew, you would leave a 2-inch space, thereabout. You leave this space for turning out all the material from the inside out. All right, so I've gone round, right round. The space that I said we should leave for turning it inside out. All right, we've sewn it all round. Let's remove all the pins. Remember to remove your pins. If you leave pins inside, you get shocked. All right. So from that space that we left, we're going to gently and carefully pull out the material. This might be a bit confusing for those of you who do not know how to sew, which is why one of the requisites for this class is knowing how to sew. But if you know how to sew, so that is where we used to do the turning out, and we're just going to tack that down with our needle and thread once we're finished. All right, so we're through with our cap, and once your cap is ready, you can now decorate. You can decorate it in so many ways. You can make it simple, you can make it complicated. So there you have your cap. Your turban cap 1 is ready. So we move on to the second design now that we're through with the first design. So we move on to this. This is quite simple because we're going to use the same basic pieces that we used for the first one. We are starting with the 5 pieces. The 5 pieces that we had 15 inches by 3 inches. You have 5 pieces of that, 15 inches on the fold, and then you take each of the piece, you sew the center of each of the 5 pieces. After sewing the center, you now sew the pieces together one after the other. After sewing the center of each piece, you put it one against the other and you sew them together. All right, so that you have all the 5 pieces sewn together. Pay attention to your center notches. The center notches allow your material to align. All right. Okay, so the 5 pieces are all sewn together, just straight, no shaping. You know, we shaped the first cap. This one has no shaping, so we just keep on sewing all the pieces together. Like I said, you sew the center of each piece and then you join all the 5 pieces together. So here you have all the 5 pieces all sewn together. Now you fold it into 2. You fold it into 2. And then you pin these ends to hold it in place. You pin this end to hold it in place. All right, you can see that. So we've put pins there. Okay, here is our center notch. We're going to put our pin there to hold it in place. I'm going to measure about 4 inches up. I'm going to place my pin there. I'm going to measure. I'll stretch and measure about 5 inches here and place my pin. All right. Okay. So what is going to happen is we're going to use our 1/2 inch elastic once again. We're going to sew. We'll pull it tight. We'll sew this way, and when the sewing gets here, we will curve it and sew to this end. We'll make sure that you pull the elastic tight so that it will gather up all the excesses here. When you're using the same color for lining, the same color for the lining, what will distinguish which one is the lining will be your label. So when you place your label inside, you know that that is the lining and this is the main material. All right, so what I have done to the main material, I have done to the lining. We have done the elastic, we have curved it so that there's an excess here that we're going to cut off, and we're going to do that carefully. All right, like I said, I've done exactly the same thing to the lining, and this is the beauty of this particular design. All right, so that's the lining, that's the main material. All right, now the band, just like we have prepared for when we were doing the purple, I've crossed it over. If you still remember our 20 inches on fold, we notch at 15, we notch at 7.5. That's our notch at 7.5, our notch at 15, and then we cross over the excess. We attach the elastic to the back so that it can expand for wearing, and then we'll cut off this excess here. And then that's the band, it's ready. That's the main material. I place it always first on the main material. The main material goes in first. So just like we did for the other cap, I'm going to notch both. I've notched the center front there, then I'm going to notch halfway. So I'm going to fold it to the center so that I can get the middle notch. All right. Okay, so somewhere there. Okay, so I've notched. It will help me to place my band easily. All right, I'm going to notch here also. That's the center front. And then we fold in two so that we get the quarter of that. Okay. And then you have to be careful with your notch. Your notches shouldn't be too big. All right, so we take the main material with the wrong side facing you. You now attach. This is the back, this is the center back. So you pick your center back also. You place it and you pin it down. And then this is your center front. You look for your center front. You place your notch together, and then you pin it. You look for the side notches. That's the side notch there. And then the second side notch. Okay. All right, so we sew round and then we place the lining exactly the same way we did with the other one. We place the lining, we leave 2 inches space for turning out. So we'll see that when it's about to be done. All right, so here we are. We have sewn all round, leaving the space for the turning. And then we'll turn it out. Do it gently and carefully. Now, like I said, if you're using matching colors, the possibility of you being confused, which one is the outer side or the inside, is there. So once I see my label, I know that that's the inside and that's where the space is. So I turn it back in, out. So exactly what you have done with the main material is what you will do with the lining. You see that when I turn it inside out, is as neat as the outside. And that is how it's supposed to be. All right. So we have our turban cap ready. And once the cap is ready, it's now ready to be decorated. All right. Remember that you cut every piece on the bias so that you'll have a beautiful finish. Somebody might ask, can't I cut it on straight grain? It's possible, but then you wouldn't get this beautiful layout as we have it here. And then you can tack on your band, you prepare your band and you tack it on. Or any other thing that you would like to add to it, and then you do. So your turban cap is the base. Your turban cap is the base for so many other things that you want to do. So once you have your cap, you can now decorate it. So we have learned today 2 designs of turbans, turban caps that we can sew, and I believe they are beautiful, and I believe you can, even from these 2 designs, you can innovate more from these 2 designs. So I hope you have enjoyed this class. If there's any issue, you don't understand a particular thing, or you have questions, or you would even like to have a video of a particular design, let me know. Get to my WhatsApp, or you DM me on Facebook or on Instagram. Gold Collections hats. Thank you very much. Let me see your own design.